Hey guys, hope you're all doing very well. Thanks for joining me again. In today's lesson, I want to get into the world of low triads, one of my personal favourite sounds and textures to use as a rhythm guitar player or a lead guitar player. These are such useful tools for when you're not soloing but you want to embellish the chord sequence a little bit. And it's common that when I'm teaching triads to people, we work on all the 4 string sets plus the spread triads. And I often ask, well, what's the point in those lower string sets? How are they going to be useful? And this is exactly how, we can use them to create these beautiful, rich, almost Hammond organ-like textures on the guitar. So we're going to start by first of all looking at the basic chord progression that we're playing over. So we're in the key of D and we're starting on D, the 1 chord. Then we go to the 5, A. Then the 4, that's G, back to the 1 again. Then the relative minor, the 6th chord of the key, B minor. And then E major or E7. Which we can think of as 2 dominant or 5 of 5, because that's the 5 chord for the A major. Then we go to the 4, G, back to D. And then the ending is just this little kind of coda repeating part where we add a bit of a bluesy flavour by playing a G7 going to a D. So that's like the 4 going to the 1 with a bit of a bluesy flavour to it. Okay, so all in all, a very typical, very standard chord progression using all of our key common elements. Now let's move on to mapping out each of those triads on the bottom 2 string sets, and then we'll get into exactly how I played them at the beginning. So D major, probably makes sense to start with this fairly easy to visualize bottom portion of your C shape from the caged system. So this would be a D major triad on string set 3. That's the root, the 3rd and the 5th. Now if we want to move this to the bottom string set, it's really as simple as retaining these bottom 2 notes and moving the top note down an octave. So this is A, let's move it down here to this A. Now we have this, one of my favourite voicings, super dense, super rich and colourful sounding. Now let's invert these shapes. So the first inversion of this one would be here, on the A, D and G strings, frets 9, 7, 7, that's your major 3rd, your 5th and your root. And again, to find the next lower string set, simply move the top note down an octave. So this D simply moves down to this D. And now we have this, which is really the bottom portion of your G shape. Okay, next inversion along. You've got this frets 12, 12, 11 on strings A, D and G. That's the 5th, the root and the 3rd. And again, if we want to get the inversion of this on the bottom string set, move the top note, F sharp, down an octave to this 14th fret of the low E string. And now you've got your first inversion there. So just to summarise, on the A, D and G strings you've got your root position D major triad, your first inversion D major triad, and your second inversion D major triad. Then on the bottom string set we're starting on the second inversion one, and then the root position, and then the first inversion. Now you want to be able to move them around to your other chords, so the 4 chord, G. There's your bottom string set. Here's your next string set. And what about the A chord? Here's your bottom string set. And the next string set. Cool. Now what about B minor? Let's think about what the B would look like. And figure out where the 3rd is. Here it is on the D string 1st fret, and flatten it to make it a minor triad. So there's B minor. Here's B minor again, the root position, and then again the first inversion. Move on to your next string set, and what does that look like? We have this, first inversion, second inversion, root position. E major. This is an easy one to start with for that, isn't it? Because it looks just like an E major open chord, except we're not bothering with the open strings around it. Next inversion of that. Next inversion of that. Bottom string set. That sounds a little familiar. Okay, now with those all mapped out, let's get into exactly what I played. We start with this little pickup line to get to our D major triad. So this is our goal, And we're simply adding, before hitting the major third, we're adding the 2 as a way to hammer onto the major third from somewhere. I often mention these arpeggios, the 1, 2, 3, 5 arpeggios in my videos, which of course are nothing but your triads, but with the 2 added. Always makes for interesting sounds. I'll link to some of my videos where we go into some depth on that stuff, because it's really useful to know. So timing wise, that's a triplet that comes in on beat 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 1. Then we have 2 beats on the D major before going to our A major, the 5 chord. And we're just using the closest available option. So that would be the root position in this case. Okay, then we go to our G major. Again, the closest option, that's also going to be the root position. Notice how we're getting the open string on the D string there. And then we go to a first inversion of that. So that's still the G major, but with the 3rd in the bass. And then back to the D that we started on, the 2nd inversion. Do try and move gracefully between your triads, kind of merge into them rather than jumping and making everything too staccato sounding. Now for the B minor, we're going to target the next string set, the 1st inversion, so that's the one with the flat 3 in the bass. We're going to slide into it from a semitone below. Now fingering wise, I like to play this with my 2nd finger and my 1st finger barring on the next 2 strings. And then B minor, next string set down, that's your root position, root, flat 3, 5. And then to the E major, the nearest one. Again, that's got the same bass note as that B major did, because you got your 5th in the bass, then the root, then the 3rd. And then down to the 1st inversion, E major. And then we go to G, the same one we used earlier, so that's your root position, and it's got the open D string involved. Now we chuck in a little G minor as a passing chord to get to D major 1st inversion. I did a video on the plagal cadence, the 4 minor going to the 1. That's a really useful thing to look into if you've not seen it. As a very basic summary, anytime you want to get from your 4, so in this case the G, back to the 1, the D, you can use the 4 minor as a sort of passing chord. So 4, 4 minor, 1 in this case. So that's G major, flatten the 3rd to make it G minor, and then resolve to this D major 1st inversion. Then we just play a simple little major pentatonic thing to send us back round to the D major here again, before going to your A major again with this little phrase where you've got to really cram in this 2nd finger as a hammer on. So that's your A major, where you're hammering on from the 5th to the 6th of the chord and then going back. Then we go to G, same as before, root position, 1st inversion, then back to D. But this time we do that bend on the D string, the major 3rd, bend it a half step, pull it down, and let it come back. I love the sound of that. Now this time for the B minor to the E major part, we get a little extra fancy on it. So spread triads are really useful. Again, I do have a very thorough video on that, one of my first lessons that I ever did. So do check that out. Again, I'll link it in the description. Oh, and I should mention that the lesson materials for this, as always, are available in the description too. You can buy them as a one-off purchase at the Gumroad link, or for 10 quid a month you can subscribe to my Patreon page where you get access to all of my lessons. So that's hundreds of lessons by now. So again, as a very quick summary to what I talk about at length in that other video, to find your spread triad, in this case the B minor here, let's start on this bottom string set root position, root, flat 3, 5. All you have to do is move the middle note up 1 octave. So this moves from here to here. Now it's very important that we mute out the A string. Beautiful sounding thing, isn't it? So dense. Find it on all of your string sets. That's a good thing to put some work into as well. Now if you think about walking that middle note up in semitones until you get here, now we've got something really interesting, right? We've got an E7 shell voicing. Now we're going to go one step further and fill in the missing A string here. So you're back on an E major triad on the bottom string set, but with the addition of the flat 7 on top. So this is now an E7 chord. B minor to E7. Very sweet sounding. That's a nice little 2-5 idea if you're ever playing jazz. be really useful as well. Now for our little bluesy outro, where we're going to basically play a G7 to a D and then put some little lick in between, we're going to use this voicing here, one of my favourite dominant 7th voicings. So G7, we've got the 5th, the flat 7 and the 3rd. Again, visually you could always be starting out or referencing this against just a G major triad, which would look like this: 5th root 3rd, and always remember that the root is a whole tone above the flat 7. Very easy to adapt these major triads to become dominant 7th triads or whatever you like, really. Another little bend here, almost blurrish. Think of Coffee and TV and tunes like that. Bending that D string down a semitone and then resolving to D major, first inversion on the next string set down. And the only thing I do here that's at all fancy really is just this hammer on from the minor to the major 3rd for the D major there. Just gives it a nice bluesy, gospel type of vibe. And then we chuck a little lead line in. Very simple, D major pentatonic, but with that passing kind of blue note. So our basic idea here is essentially 2 beats of G7 to a D major, and then 1 beat where we can do anything we want, some kind of lick. In this case, before going round again. Notice how I'm doing a push on this D major. That means we bring it in on the offbeat just ahead of the beat. So instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going 1, 2, and 3, 4. So bringing it in on the and of 2 with a swing feel. For our next little interjection, again just D major pentatonic. All very simple really. Pick near the bridge if you want a bit more texture, before resolving back to this G7 with the D in the bass. Then the next phrase, again very simple, very minimal, just D major pentatonic. One of these classic country moves. But in this case, because we're going for more of a bluesy gospel vibe, we don't want to do a full bend all the way to the major 3rd. We want to make it a little lazier. And then we're back to this again, before doing this lovely little double stop run. Something you've seen me use tons of times. We're thinking D minor pentatonic really this time, or D minor blues scale. And we're thinking of this little kind of run, using the flattened 5th and then coming down the scale. The difference here is that we're also including the top 2 strings at the 10th fret. And in this case, the top 3 strings at the 10th fret, because we're pulling off to this barring 1st finger. Very cool sounding, very piano-like again. Make sure that you hybrid pick this to get it to really pop. So that's plectrum, 2nd finger, 3rd finger, strings G, B and E. And then we're back to this again, G7 to the D major. This time we do another double stop run, but really focusing in on the major pentatonic again, or the D mixolydian you could even be thinking of here. Ending back on this triad. So we've got the middle 2 strings at the 7th fret barred, and then we're playing around with notes from the mixolydian scale, I guess. Flat 7, 6, 5th, 4th, and a typical bluesy thing where we go in from the minor to the major 3rd there. And then we're back to the G7 over D, where we're going to let things simmer down for an ending that sounds like this. So there's your G7 over D. Again, hybrid picking. I'm using the 2nd and 3rd fingers on strings A and D, and the plectrum on the low E string. And then we're letting things just slow, and then finishing on D major, with that hammer on again from the minor to major 3rd, but then also grab the root on the G string here. So we're finishing on what would really be the bottom 4 strings of this G shape. Okay, now that's the study done, but let's take a bit of a deeper look at some of these picking techniques. Let's take a D major triad here, a as our sort of left-hand reference point. So when you hybrid pick, it's very important that you get an equal balance of volume across the strings that you're hitting. So this would be the plectrum on the low E string, second finger on the A string, third finger on the D string. And I'm really making sure that it sounds balanced. Also practice peeling like this. These kinds of sounds are really useful. They add a little bit of class to it. It sounds almost kind of classical to me. I think it's always good to make up these little warm-up exercises, just so you're really dialing in the agility and accuracy on both hands. Now, of course, it's always good to work on your strumming and dialing in your right hand agility and accuracy. So also practice strumming these without hearing any of these unwanted open strings on top. All in the name of good technique, that stuff. Now, same thing applies for your spread triad. So let's take the B minor. Make sure that you're accurate with your picking, and that you could free float the hand and accurately pick out those three strings. Accidental James Bond, always welcome. Now what about if you hybrid pick that? Plectrum on the bass string, then second and third fingers on strings D and G. Work on getting that volume balance correct. Also the peel technique again. Always important to dial these things in nicely. All of these different shades of expression available under your fingers at a moment's notice. You don't pre-plan this stuff, it just comes out of you when you're playing. Now with the opening performance, I was basically just playing this along with just a metronome, a kick drum on every beat of the bar at 60 BPM, very simple. So I would of course recommend that you practice it that way too. Also make sure that you very quickly start to turn these shapes towards other chord progressions in different keys as well. I just used to grab like a Beatles songbook or something and just follow along with the changes using nothing but your triads on the bottom string sets. It's a really good challenge to put those limitations on yourself so you're really focusing in a very narrow area. Okay guys, so for gear talk, I was using my Nacho caster. I was on the neck pickup the whole time. And for the performance at the start, I was using a Walrus Audio Fathoms reverb pedal, which I really like. It's very inspiring, especially on the lo-fi setting, where it detunes the reverb trail. So it's kind of got this modulation, kind of dreamy, seasick kind of vibe to it. And I really enjoy that. And again, for the performance, I was plugged into my 64 Fender Bassman amp. But for the lesson here, I've just been plugged straight into my 69 Deluxe reverb. The strings on this guitar are String Joy Broadways, gauges 10 to 46. And this is like their vintage style string, so it's round core and it's pure nickel. Really warm and mellow sounding. And the plectrum is my usual pick of choice, for electric guitar at least, Dunlop H3. Okay guys, so let's call it a day there. Please do let me know down in the comments if you've enjoyed this lesson. And don't forget to like and subscribe. That stuff makes a massive difference to the success of this channel, and I really do appreciate it. Okay guys, take care, and I'll see you again next time.